Hi, this is Jim Yule, and I have Julian Brewer here with me today. Julian's formerly of Barclays Bank, and he's now a freelance consultant specializing in digital marketing. Welcome, Julian.
Hi, Jim. Nice to talk to you.
Nice to talk to you. So let's just dive right into it, and I'd like to understand how you got started with Agile Marketing.
Okay, I think it's fair to say there was no distinct point where I suddenly started working with digital marketing. It was more of an evolution, and the evolution started really within the technical teams. So the move within IT development teams away from waterfall type approach and moving into Agile. So those teams were really quite formally trained in Agile. But for me, it was an evolution, looking at those teams and understanding what they were doing, and then taking their techniques and using those across into Agile marketing, or marketing that we were doing digitally, both on the public and secure site for Barclays.
Okay. And tell me a little bit more about how you introduced Agile into Barclays. You know, were there some particular challenges in getting the marketing team and the rest of the organization to adopt it?
So how was it first introduced? The way that it came in was really within the testing and learning and optimization of the site. So that was the place where these sort of techniques started. And that was some 4 or 5 years ago. So back in sort of 2007, 2008. And it wasn't known as Agile Digital Marketing at the time. And in fact, you know, Agile was a concept, was really just starting out. But what was happening was the improvements on the site were starting to become a lot more automated. So A/B testing and multivariate testing was really starting to come into the team. And it could have been run in a typical direct marketing offline manner, where a test was run, it was set up, and it would run for a very good length of time, for 2 or 3 months. All of the analysis was done out the back end, and you'd start all over again. Not particularly agile, and really quite slow within a digital environment.
Right.
So what tended to happen was we'd start off a test, and given the volumes that were coming through some of the really high traffic pages, we were discovering some of the attributes and the outputs from these tests really quite quickly, sometimes within 24 hours, but certainly within days, because the traffic was really quite strong.
Yeah.
Therefore, you know, we weren't just doing A versus B testing, we were doing 3 or 4 or 5 different alternatives, and really throwing those in and trying to work out what was happening. And that started us really looking at the delivery of the content for those tests, and saying that the piece that was slowing it down was the delivery of the content in there. So the process then started to evolve as we worked with other teams to really get quite agile and fast about how we learned and developed.
Okay. And did you formally introduce some of the more formal methodology, like, you know, Scrum and daily stand-ups and that sort of thing, or how did you run the thing?
Yeah. So there weren't those formal aspects to Agile that were brought in to start with, but because we required really some quite key areas to be able to get involved, so user experience, content delivery, and then the commercial teams, is quite naturally these teams just came together. So rather than just sending emails out or wandering across the office and saying we just need these things faster, it was just a lot easier to be able to involve these people at the beginning of the process and form a team, which normally you could call a scrum, to be able to drive these things forward. Once we saw what the IT teams were doing, we could then take a word and say that's a scrum team that's working on it, but it wasn't actually called that to start with. And then as the whole process became faster and faster, actually it became a need to be able to have a conversation not just once a month about these things, but then it tightened down to a week. And then on some of the really high traffic pages, like the homepage, it became a daily conversation. So essentially you had a stand-up conversation. Okay. Usually it was around a desk, but if it wasn't a desk, it was physically standing up to be able to have those things. So the process of Agile, the processes we naturally would associate with Agile, including a Scrum Master, etc., just became evolved within this process that we were conducting.
Oh, that's really interesting. So In terms of results, I mean, what did you guys see in terms of being able to do things faster, or getting, more cooperation from other groups, or, just what did you see in terms of results of kind of applying this, process over time?
So the evolution of it was the most interesting piece. So yes, quite naturally we were finding some really good uplifts on the site. So within a case study which I've just put out around our ISA season, we were seeing some 60 to 70% uplift year on year by some of the techniques that we were doing. If you then roll those ones out in a micro level, that meant that some elements of the site, such as the navigation and buttons and so forth, would have to change, and we were discovering these things really quite quickly about size of buttons, color of buttons, use of language, layouts and so forth, that were working really quite well. The challenge that brought, and probably quite recently, was once the user experience and the brand for the site was pretty well fixed and defined, is that these agile methodologies were throwing up things that needed to change with that. Mm-hmm. And that then started to create some political grinding of gears, where somebody has a very fixed view about how UX or how the brand ought to look, whereas actually the numbers and the discovery through this process was saying, well, actually things might need to change a little bit. Right. One particular one that was thrown up, which really came to the fore, was the use of what we called a mega button. And the mega button was where a customer was returning to a site. We discovered the fact that they were sitting within a particular segment, which was really ready to buy. And you know what? We put a large button in front of them, not saying buy on it, but it was just making the whole use of the site and the usability really easier. The customer was coming back to the site, and we were giving them what we thought they were after. Right. But it broke the brand guidelines.
Okay.
And that really threw up the grinding of the gears, and that was back end of 2011. But what it started to show is that actually some of the brand guidelines of the site needed to evolve alongside the agile marketing techniques and discovery of personalization and improvement that we were finding. So that piece is still ongoing, but that's where the grinding of the gears comes in and the challenges.
Yeah, that's really interesting how the brand guidelines, in some ways take a second or a back seat to what's working for the customer that you're finding out through these experiments and through these metrics and measurements and things. So
typically brand guidelines come from an offline world, and an offline world is a lot more static. And once you've got all your posters up and your TV and all the rest of it, it's all fixed. Somebody goes, what, can we change that? They go, well, we invest a lot of money over here. And we go, well, you might do, but the customers seem to respond a lot better to this.
Yeah, really interesting. So you have a deck out there on Agile Marketing, and I thought it was really fascinating. A great job on it. And you have a slide that says, man and machine need to be a team. And I thought that was really interesting. I like the graphic on it and so forth. Can you tell me about that slide and what do you mean by that?
Yeah, so the machine is the learning ability of web. And that machine could either be data, so learning from your social signals that you're being given, from your email response, from your web analytics, or it could be from the optimization that is happening either off-site within bidding engines and ad serving capability, or on-site within personalization. So what it really means is that you can't just leave these processes alone. You need to try and learn and understand and get intelligence out of them. And that intelligence and that knowledge is the feed in order to be able to improve and go back around the circle of sprinting towards an improvement for user experience, targeting, whatever it might be. And so many of these engines have started out life as a black box solution.
Yeah.
And the real problem with those black box solutions for me is that you don't get the knowledge out of them that allows you to understand where you take the next sprint. And therefore, a lot of these engines that started out of those black box have now evolved to be able to provide a lot of information to the user. And really, it's that use of that data by the teams working in harmony with the machine, and rather than letting the machine just run away and do its thing,
Yeah.
is where the real gain comes.
That's really interesting. So I think that's an accurate insight. It's not just the black box of the machine, but it's the human sort of guiding and getting enough information on that so that they can decide, okay, here's the new direction we should try to go, or something like that. So that's really interesting. All right, so what's next for you? What next, both in terms of Agile and in terms of what you're focusing on next?
Yeah, for me, see, it's interesting. So, and you may see it a different way, but Agile digital marketing is it's a concept that's really just started to come about.
Yeah.
A little bit. And therefore, I think what would be really interesting is starting to work on some of the processes associated with Agile digital marketing to formalize those. Because Agile comes from a more of a technical build standpoint originally, or certainly that's where I came across it. And it doesn't always naturally fit easily into a digital marketing world where there's science, but there's art in there as well.
Yep.
So it'd be very interesting to see how Agile and concepts like minimum viable product come together and bring those to bear on digital marketing. So I'd like to be able to work in that space and work with people to be able to improve their processes while I learn, because nobody's got the final answer. Right. But I think it's a very nice space to be able to work in, either as a consultant or to be able to bring it to bear against another large organization, probably multinational, to be able to see how I can improve it from the inside.
All right. Well, great. This has been just a great conversation. Best of luck to you, and we'll look forward to seeing what you're doing next.
Excellent. Thanks, Jim.
All right. Thank you.
Take care.